As I stated to this Council immediately after those consultations, the success in Stockholm was your success. And I must start, therefore, by thanking the members of the Security Council for adopting that resolution to which you have referred, sir, Resolution 2451, which endorsed the agreement, authorised the deployment of the advanced team to support and facilitate implementation, expressed support for the continuation of consultations early this year, including on the framework for negotiations. And I believe that this resolution that you passed last month sends a very clear signal of the international community's support for the achievements that we were able to bring together in Stockholm and our plans subsequently to build on the momentum gained. Today, I will take this opportunity to brief on the implementation of the commitments made by the parties in Stockholm, namely the agreement reached on the city and governorate of Hodeidah and the ports of Hodeidah, Salif and Ras Issa. Second, the executive mechanism on activating the prisoner exchange agreement. And thirdly, the statement of understanding on ties. And I will also hope to provide an update, Mr. President, on our preparations for the next round of consultations. Since the Stockholm consultations and in very recent days, in this past week, I have had the privilege of meeting with President Abdurrabbo Mansour Hadi and also indeed with the Ansarallah leader, Abdul Malik al-Houthi. President Hadi, whom I met indeed yesterday in Riyadh, warmly welcomed the proposal, the progress made in Stockholm and the agreement made there to which he was the key decider. And he confirmed to me in very real and constructive terms his hopes, as we all have, that this is an important first step towards a comprehensive solution to the conflict. And I was interested to hear a reflection of exactly those sentiments when I was in Sana'a on Sunday in my meetings with Abdul Malik al-Houthi, who firmly told me in no uncertain terms of the decision and commitment of his movement to implement all those provisions that were agreed in Stockholm. So they both expressed determination to find a way forward and to build further on the progress made in subsequent rounds. And I would like us all to bear that in mind, as I do, when we look at the progress, somewhat difficult, some of it, on the implementation of those agreements. But I'm grateful to President Hadi, and of course I'm grateful also to Sayyid Abdul Malik. This enthusiasm for actually making Stockholm work and provide tangible differences on the ground for the people of Yemen was also echoed by other concerned parties and key member states I have had the privilege to meet since Stockholm and in particular in recent days. And I'm grateful for their support, and they know who they are. I'm pleased to report that both sides have largely adhered to the ceasefire we agreed in Stockholm in Hodeidah Governorate that entered into force on the 18th of December, and that there has been a significant decrease in hostilities since then. Unfortunately, and perhaps unsurprisingly, there has been some violence, including in Hodeidah city and in the southern districts of the governorate. However, this is remarkably limited compared to what we saw in the weeks before the Stockholm consultations. And this relative calm, I believe, sir, indicates the tangible benefit of the Stockholm Agreement for the people of Yemen, and it also illustrates the commitment of both parties to make their agreements work. Thanks to the swift authorization provided by this Council through Resolution 2451, the United Nations has deployed an advanced monitoring team to Hodeidah under the leadership of my esteemed colleague Major General Patrick Kammert of the Netherlands, who arrived in Yemen on the 22nd of December. And I should say here that I think it's a remarkable achievement that Major Kamat tore himself away from other commitments and launched himself with his team into the region at very short notice to establish the RCC, the committee which will monitor those agreements in Hodeidah. We're very grateful to Patrick Kamat. This rapid deployment has given a clear signal to the parties and the Yemeni people of the international community's desire to turn the agreement into facts on the ground. General Kamat has chaired several meetings of the Redeployment Coordination Committee with participation from representatives of both parties to oversee the implementation of the redeployments and the ceasefire as agreed in Sweden on Hodeidah. He's working with the parties on the details of the redeployments of forces, again as foreseen in Sweden, the provision of security in the city, and the opening of humanitarian access routes agreed in Stockholm. The activation of the Redeployment Coordination Committee, which has happened since that arrival on late December of General Kamat, is very, very welcome. And I urge both parties to continue to engage regularly and in good faith with General Kamat and his team so that the security arrangements and, crucially, the improvements in humanitarian access can be implemented swiftly in line with what was agreed in Stockholm. This will build confidence of the parties, the Yemeni people in the international community, that what was talked about in Stockholm can be a reality. Mr. President, regarding TAIS, as Council members will recall, the parties agreed in Stockholm to the creation of mechanisms to reach consensus on how to address the situation in that city and governorate. TAIS is of enormous historic significance for Yemen as a whole, and the city and its people have been a driving force in Yemen's economic and cultural life for many years. And to give it a sense of proportion, the governorate of TAIS has a population of 2.5 million people, and the city of TAIS has been divided by virtue of this conflict for some considerable time. And the civilians in TAIS have suffered far too much for far too long, and the destruction in the city has been dreadful. And the flow of humanitarian aid, of course, needs to increase, needs to cross the lines between the parties, and the people need the chance to rebuild. And these are the issues that we believe that joint mechanism, the committee that I will refer to, is there to produce. I have talked since Stockholm with the parties and with many prominent TAISis, including my office has met the governor yesterday, and they all want the city to return to calm and for the people to have hope that the city will flourish once again. And I'm glad that Stockholm provides a potential platform for this. So we plan, with the agreement of the parties, to hold the first meeting of that committee as soon as possible, ideally this month. And we also are working on a civil society mechanism, including significant participation of women, to support that joint committee in its endeavours. I'm hopeful, Mr. President, that what we might plan to see in TAIS is something that we might also be seeing achieved in Hodeidah. Hodeidah should not be the only beneficiary of the agreements that we made in Sweden. On the agreement for the exchange of prisoners, we are working with both parties to finalise the lists of prisoners submitted by each in Stockholm. I particularly want to record our appreciation of the invaluable support provided by the International Committee of the Red Cross in this regard. And as agreed in Stockholm, we plan to hold a meeting of the Supervisory Committee, which includes both parties, and I'm hopeful that this will take place in Amman, from which I'm speaking, on Monday of next week. And this will be a step towards that day that we hope to see of an airlift of many, many thousands of prisoners exchanged and released to return to their families. I'm grateful for the commitment and patience that both parties have shown since Stockholm. Progress on some of the issues has been gradual and indeed it's somewhat tentative. but there is a tangible contribution to peace. There are no doubt many hurdles to be overcome in the days, weeks, and months ahead, but I would say here that the parties must not be diverted from their commitments through issues of delays or difficulties which are unexpected. And I ask for the support of the Council in encouraging the parties to stay the course and to overcome together any challenges that may be encountered along the way, and that we are here to help them. Mr. President, I am under no illusion that these are very sensitive and challenging days for both parties and for Yemen as a whole. The war continues in other parts of the country, which is why we need to make progress quickly. I call on the parties to recognise that these first steps need to be protected so that we can reach those other parts of the countries in due course. The conflict continues to have a terrible impact on the economy and the overall humanitarian situation, as I know Mark will be describing, sir, in a minute. It was unfortunate that we were unable to reach consensus on a way forward on the Central Bank of Yemen while we were together in Sweden, and on the opening of Sana'a Airport during those consultations in December. Both of these issues, if resolved, would make a significant contribution to relieving humanitarian suffering. And of course, as we discussed in the Security Council meeting in December, we continue to work on trying to get solutions before the resumption of the next round of consultations. I should mention that, as ever, the demands of southern groups are also a key part of the solution to the Yemeni equation. I'm grateful for the effort exerted by key Yemeni stakeholders and the international community to improve stability in the southern governorates in recent months, which has been a remarkable achievement. As I've always said, I'm committed to ensuring the participation of southern groups in the peace process, and I'm continuing to work with this goal in mind with a range of those groups. Their contribution will be of vital importance in fulfilling the hope of peace. Mr. President, to conclude, the message that I have been receiving, particularly from the parties, but also from key member states and those with an interest in peace in Yemen, has been consistent in these past days, and it is this. It is that we must implement what was agreed in Sweden and show substantial progress in those commitments if we are to build the confidence that we have hoped to create from them. There is a sense of tangible hope. There's a sense of optimism as well as concern. It's my view, and it is shared by leadership of both parties, but also others, that substantial progress, particularly on Hodeidah, of course, is something that we would like to see before we reconvene the next consultations. You will remember that in the Stockholm Agreement, there was an agreement to open those consultations without conditions. This is not a matter of conditioning that decision. It is a matter of making progress so that in the next round, we will not be dealing with the issues that have been agreed in the first. So I'm still hopeful that we can proceed to a next round of consultations within the near future. And I'm working with both parties to make sure that that will happen at the earliest possible date, and that in those consultations, we will begin both to monitor the progress made out of Sweden, but also to discuss the fundamental issues that need to be addressed to resolve this conflict. Mr. President, thank you very much.